have such stories I could tell you.
And we want to hear them, really. If you don't tell us, we won't know.
I know what you're asking. Just for an hour. Very tricky. What's the point in having a mate with a time machine if you can't hold to open?
Hold to open?
Yes, and what do you do?
We read the time waves.
I don't understand.
Events sit as they will. We only witness.
All we can strive to be is good men.
I want to know what happens.
Come on.
Here come the drums!
Hello, and welcome to Pull to Open, the only ongoing quest on your podcast dial to watch all of the television show Doctor Who in entirely random order. My name is Chris Taylor.
And I'm Pete Paschal, and we are not randomly here in time and space at the end of the year, folks. This is the last Pull to Open of the year. We're imminently going to arrive at January 1st, 2024. We're closing out this really momentous year in the world of Doctor Who. But we have some things to share about what's going on here. But before we do that, Chris, do you want to bring the listeners up to speed on where we have been lately?
Indeed. Should old Pull to Opens be forgot and never brought to mind? Yes, they will never be forgot, and we will bring them to mind. And let's bring to mind where we've been recently in the last 3 journeys. 3 stories ago, we were taking a little drug-based break in the Amsterdam of space with the smuggling of the drug Vraxoxin in Vraxoin, yes.
You had it the first time. Yeah, you're good.
There we go. I'm good. In Nightmare of Eden, which we dubbed The Wire in Space. And then 2 stories ago, we dived into even murkier waters, the evil in men's hearts and bodies and spirits, and we dived into the murky ethics of the Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit, with our good friend Ellie Blackwood explaining planets to us. And then last time, we got even deeper into the ethics of a major question of like how much the Doctor interferes or can interfere in someone's life in a very Christmas-themed episode on A Christmas Carol. That's right, the Randomizer doing seasonally appropriate programming for us. And after that, I don't know if you remember at the end, Pete, last week when we jumped back into our TARDIS and we asked questions of the Randomizer, and I said, please, give us something light. Give us something where I don't have to think too much, because we've been quite thinky.
A little bit.
And I should have known better than to say that, because the Randomizer said, oh no.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, Britt, you are going to dive into one of the murkiest ethical quandaries that your nation has ever been involved in. You're going to spend more than a week reading up on the history of this event. You're going to have to go through some things, my friend. No lack of ethics, no ethics break for you, said the Randomizer, because it took us to Series 11, Jodie Whittaker's first season, Episode 6, Demons of the Punjab.
Boom.
Dropped
That's it,
the mic on ethics there. That's a big, thinky story. My goodness, Pete.
What a weighty way to end the year. Yeah, that was huge. It's
totally.
Definitely messing with you, man, that Randomizer. It's not every now and then it sort of does exactly what we want, and every now and then it does exactly the opposite, and it really hits you hard here for the holiday season. By the way, thank you very much for diving in, guys. We're going to have an epic length history corner. I shouldn't say length at the start of a podcast that's already pretty long. Well, you can look at how long the podcast is and decide whether it's long or not, but it's going to be epically weighted, shall I say.
We're going to have a really interesting history corner, because you probably, as a listener, I would say probably less likely to understand the whole history of Partition. We're going to bring you up to speed. We're going to bring you up to speed in the whole background, everything that I would have wanted to know when I first watched Demons of the Punjab. We're going to have a little Q&A on that, a little FAQ.
Exactly. We're gonna keep it not light, certainly, but we are going to keep it focused. Obviously, there have been a lot written about the partition and a lot of certainly podcasts, I'm sure, that have explored it. We're going to explore it when sort of what it matters to the story here. But we're going to save that for a little bit later. So look out, folks. The commentary's coming. Before we do that, I wanted to just say a thing or two about this here podcast, Pull to Open. And this is something I have not said at all until this point, which is to say we have achieved a goal that I never revealed, which is we wanted to have new content for you, the listener, every single week of 2023. And I didn't want to jinx myself by promising that at even last week. I didn't want to say it because I knew life would get in the way, and it almost did, to prevent us from doing another episode. But we've done it. This is it. You've had new content every week, and sometimes you've had more than that, because obviously we've had hot takes on the new Doctor Who. The last one we just posted. This is actually funny. It's happening in the future for us, but it's happened just a few days ago for you, dear listener, that we did our hot take on the Church of Ruby Road. And now the Demons of the Punjab episode closes out the year. That gives us 56 total Pull to Opens, full episodes of Pull to Open.
6. This is the first year, the first of Pull to Open's 4 seasons, in which we have exceeded the number of weeks a year. Is that correct?
Exactly. And so we went to weekly in season 3, I think so. So the previous year, and we were pretty good, but we didn't quite achieve that. And obviously we had life get in the way, and there were, problems and issues and whatever. We tried, but we didn't quite do it. This time we were much smarter about the schedule. Yes, not every single Pull to Open is about an episode of Doctor Who. We do a lot of side trips, but some of those are some of the best episodes. Honestly, like we've gone down some roads, whether it's when talking about when the Doctor was cruel or cowardly, or just taking apart the notion of what is a companion. We've done a lot of interesting stuff and sparked a lot of discussion with those side trips. So they're all worthwhile.
The gifts the Doctor received, the one that just went up as we're recording this, like that took us to some interesting places. Like I'd never considered how many gifts or what exactly the Doctor receives as a gift in the show. So that was going someplace new. We did our episode on the cold opens, all the cold opens of Doctor Who, which turned out to be a bigger lift than the thing we were doing a side quest to get away from.
We just thought this will be no problem. We'll just watch a bunch of 1 minute, 2 minute things at the end of a beginning of a bunch of episodes, and it turns out, oh boy, did many showrunners like indulge in cold opens and basically did mini episodes. Yeah, that took a long time.
Yeah, indeed. So,
but folks,
we couldn't do math on that one.
So I just want to say thank you very much, folks, for a great year. We've also, one of the things about being this consistent is that it's been great to see our listenership steadily increase. We've got a lot of followers you still have a lot of followers on TikTok, more than 11,000. We're getting more and more subscribers on YouTube every week. Thank you for following there. That really helps the show, even if you're already following on the podcast. And we've got big plans for next year. So in 2024, I'm not going to go into it right this second, but we're going to shake things up a bit and try to get you even more content. So yes, we did 52 weeks a year with 56 episodes. I'm not saying we're going to beat that, but we are going to give you more and more that we can do. Because in the past year, we launched the website, we launched some more social channels, and we see there's a lot of potential on the table for all this. So look for more of that in the future, and don't hold back from commenting. Go ahead and let us know what you like about the show, what you'd like to see. Feel free to reach out anywhere where you can find us. And I'm kind of sort of transitioned fully into the pulse loop, which I haven't really mentioned, because this has been a whole for taking of the pulse of Pull to Open. I'm a little bit off script here, guys. Sorry, but
all good. We're at New Year's. We're in a celebratory mood. I've just discovered that on the app we use, Zencaster, if I do that with my thumbs, then we get exploding.
How is it you get all these and I don't? I do it and it just nothing happens.
I'm recording on an iPhone 14. Maybe it's something to do with the ability of the camera on that to recognize thumbs up. I know that.
I think the randomizer is rewarding you in advance for all the work you put in this week on Demons in the Punjab and all the stuff you've read and stuff you prepared. So we're going to try to get to that as soon as possible. But folks, let's formally get into the Pulse Loop, where we will talk about the all-new Whomoji challenge for Chris. We're going to do a little poll to open by looking at results for our podcast on the Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit. It's all coming up. But then again, if for whatever reason you just want to cut right to the commentary and the serious stuff we have about Demons in the Punjab, go ahead and check your show notes. Check the notes under the video if you're watching on YouTube, and it'll give you the exact time code to fast forward to start with TLDW, where one of us summarizes the plot in record time. Everybody else, come with me. And why don't you also come with me to poll2open.net, our base on the World Wide Web, where you can actually subscribe to our newsletter, get full notes, and some other things perhaps in the future. But it's definitely worth doing. And also don't forget to become a patron if you can. That's a great way to support the show. Go to patreon.com/poll2open.
Yeah, so I want to say that there are two things that have really differentiated Pull to Open from all those other Doctor Who podcasts in 2023. One, of course, is that we're random. Good Lord, why don't those other podcasts install a randomizer? Because look what the randomizer did. At the start of the year, it took us to the Celestial Toy Maker. Whatever gift that was. It took us to Human Nature Family of Blood on Remembrance Day. Day. How appropriate, the Doctor putting on a poppy at the end, like it's so focused on that. By the way, this episode, Demons of the Punjab, also released on Remembrance Sunday.
Right,
in 2018.
True fact.
So, again, we're seeing all sorts of connections for you. We're bringing it to you. That's one differentiation, the random element. The other one is that we're everywhere. We're on every damn platform. And you can review us on a lot of those platforms or leave comments. One of the best things to do is if you do have access to Apple Podcasts, that's probably the biggest thing in terms of getting us in front of more eyes. So if you've got, if it's much of a muchness to you, review us there. But review us everywhere, however many stars you feel like giving. That gives more visibility to the podcast, gets it to more listeners. And you can also share it with a friend. Just drop it into your iMessage or text window and just, pick a random friend, share the podcast with them. And when you're leaving a review, feel free to leave just a title of a Doctor Who story that you like in the form of emoji. Now, this could be the content of the story itself. It could be a description of the title of the story. It doesn't matter. If you leave it in the form of emoji, it then becomes part of the upcoming segment, the Whomoji Challenge.
All right. Cool. I'm going to put the sting right there. Let's just get right into it. This is, of course, the time where I get to torture Chris for the last time in 2023 by describing emojis to him. And he has to guess the Doctor Who title that emoji represents, or set of emojis. So why don't we just get right into it? Let's do this. And I'm not going to give you any hints whatsoever.
Oh, God.
At all. There will be no hints. Because, frankly, you won't need them. Because it's one emoji.
Oh, my God. Okay.
And
it's so embarrassing if I don't get it.
It is a circle that is the color black.
So is it full circle? No.
It is not full circle.
Is it a black hole? Is it the impossible planet Satan Pit? No.
No.
This would be embarrassing. God, I mean, a circle, black circle. What else has circle in the title?
Do you need a hint? I didn't think you were going to need a hint for this one.
I'm sorry. Well, let's
this will probably give it away.
Yeah.
But
we could just what is another word for circle? Sphere. Oh, God. What is another word for circle? I'm thinking like pi. I'm thinking radius, diameter. Why am I not just thinking for another word for a wheel? The wheel in space.
Not the wheel in space. Sorry. I just realized for the folks not on YouTube, I'm shaking my head when Chris says stuff and he gets it wrong. But yeah. That's why there's a little bit of silence.
Oh God! What is another a wheel? Like, what other wheels are there?
Okay, Jeez, wow! Really didn't think you need this many hints. How about?
I'm gonna kick myself.
Okay, it's a bit of a cheat on this one because the emoji represents only part of the title.
Okay.
So there's another part of the title that isn't represented, but
is it wheel something? Is it or like I'm hung up on this other word for circle thing?
Maybe if you saw it, I realized I didn't put the emoji in
the black circle, right? It's
a black circle. No, it's solid.
Oh,
it's a solid black circle. Sorry,
okay.
Should I have said that? There it is. I put it in the chat.
Okay, which I can't see because I'm in dark mode.
Okay, but it is a solid black circle, so it's completely black.
So the black hole. It's the God. What are they?
Getting warm.
Hole in the title?
Not hole.
Okay, can you help me with old Who or new Who?
Black hole, black circle,
black sun, black
circular thing. A black.
Oh.
Remember, this is only part of the title. The black something.
The black something. Why are all Doctor Who titles? I've got a head full of Partition, and no Doctor Who titles in it. What is going on here? The black something. The black orchid.
Okay, it's new Who. There's a good.
Okay.
Good hint for you.
The black something. God, titles with black in them. It's fleeing my mind. You're gonna have to tell me which Doctor.
11.
11. The black spot. Oh, for goodness.
Boom! There you go. The what of the black spot, though? Say the title.
Of the black spot.
That's it.
Thank you. And let's bring listeners up to speed that we do have a curse on the podcast. I feel like
apparently extends to the Whomoji challenge.
I do not think of spot as a synonym for circle, but I get where you're going with that.
Yeah, wow. I think it works. I think it's fine. Well, you get our home game, I guess, as you exit the Whomoji challenge. I don't think we can call that a win with about 3 or 4 hints.
I think I'm hanging up my Whomoji gloves.
Well, you've done so well throughout the year that I wouldn't read too much into this final one, particularly since you're already in your own black hole of your own making by going down the rabbit hole of the Indian partition. But good stuff. I wanted to just shout out Bob Gilby on Twitter, who gave us a bunch of these. We've got more to come, Chris, and I consider the other ones hard. When we return in the new year.
When you think of me in the new year, I want you to think of the Rocky montage, except instead of running up steps in Philly, I am just scrolling through the spreadsheet with a list of episode titles.
Gotcha. All right, so you need a rest, I think. I'll take the pulse loop from here for a second, and I'll just remind.
I'll be 14, you be 15. I'm going to go have a meal with Donna now. Bye.
Sounds good. And I'm going to have a meal with our Spotify listeners, who are amazing folks because they keep commenting, they keep voting in our polls, and that's right. We have entered Poll to Open. Now, of course, at the end of every podcast, we give all of our shows, our episodes, a rating from a Dalek to an Ogron to a Viscount Banger, etc., etc. Stay tuned to the end of the show to find out what all those mean if you're not sure. But we have results, and we discuss them now. And we have results from the Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit.
Indeed.
And everybody...
Yes. First thing to say, by the way, this result is malleable. You can change time.
Oh, yeah.
You can vote in these polls if you want to.
There are thousands and thousands of days left in the poll. That might be too much time. It does mean you shouldn't put it off because it will close one day. We'll finally get to that day, and you'll be like, oh my God, I never voted in the poll to open poll on the Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit. Go ahead and do it now when I'm reminding you. But
if you listen to that podcast, you'll hear that I was outvoted on the podcast. I said it was a Dalek, which is our rating for a good, not necessarily best of the best, but good episode of Doctor Who.
I did. I did say it was one of the best of the best. Yes, Ellie and I both did. So you were outnumbered there, and you are now outnumbered here. Our listeners agree. This is one of the best of the best. The Viscount Banger takes half of the votes, and a good chunk of the rest go to Dalek, as you said. So, like, this is a very well-regarded episode of Doctor Who. There's a few folks said it was like an Ogron, which is roughly 10 to 12% of the vote here. And at least a few people thought it was a fixed point in time with around 5 to 6% of the vote. So, okay, I can see the fixed point in time. The Ogron, wow, that's being pretty harsh. Maybe I guess people who just didn't buy into the whole this is Satan for every planet everywhere.
Right. I mean,
maybe that's too far.
I can see how you can have a very uncharitable viewing of that story, especially if you haven't seen it in a while. I might have rated an Ogron immediately after my first viewing. Like
interesting.
It's so cliched, based under siege. You've got the die-hard element with the ventilation shafts. Like, it just, I can see how a lot of things would just rub you the wrong way, and you can vote an Ogron for that. So, yeah, quite a literally divisive episode with the Viscount Banger getting 50% of the vote, Dalek 33% of the vote. Interesting, yeah. We're not going to solve that one. It's partition-esque.
Well, only you, listener, can solve it. So go ahead and vote in it if you haven't already. If you don't have Spotify, what are you doing? Got to download Spotify, create a burner account. Go ahead and vote. What you don't want to create a burner account on, though, is, of course, YouTube, where we're at youtube.com/pull-to-open. That is a great place to have an account and stay there, because you can actually turn on notifications for whenever we have new content. It's a great place to leave a comment. There's a lot of great discussion there. We try to reply to every comment, and we do our best. If we haven't replied to you, we probably will soon. And you can see all the fun Easter eggs in the background of our spots here, even though Chris has exactly one right now, unless you count that beautiful view of the Bay Area. But indeed. Go ahead, check us out on YouTube and turn on that bell icon, I think it is, to get notifications whenever we have new content.
Ding that bell icon, smash the subscribe button. Go check out our review of The Celestial Toymaker if you would like to hear that being described in 2 minutes in our TLDW segment, the one that's coming up. Also, go check us out on TikTok. Unfortunately, TikTok has, since our last podcast, stopped the ability to upload entire podcasts to TikTok. That may have just been an experiment. It may be coming back. But give us a follow there. Anyway, we're Pull to Open on TikTok. We've got tons of shorts from our episodes. It's really a way to get a TLDW on Pull to Open itself. Keep commenting. Also, if you're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, Pull to Open 63, and Blue Sky, Pull to Open. And now, it is time.
And now, is it?
It is time.
Okay.
Speaking of TLDW, Too Long Didn't Watch Too Long Doctor Who. It is time for that segment where one of us, each week, we take turns to summarize the entire story that we're discussing.
That is what we do.
It is what we do. It is,
and as much as in the moment right now, I would like to say we're not doing this anymore in 2024. I think we'll keep doing it because it's just our thing. That's not going to change.
Edition. We are building a library. That's what we're doing. There will be silence in the library at the end, but we're building this library of TLDWs, of summaries of literally every single story in Doctor Who history, in random order. That's kind of what the podcast is a Trojan horse for. So it is your turn this week, Pete, and since Steve is a new Who story, we allocate 1 minute for new Who stories, 30 seconds for each old Who episode. So you don't have a lot of time, sir. You have 1 minute.
I know. This is going to
history of India and Pakistan.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. I'm going to save that for the pod and mostly the history corner. So apologies that this won't be as weighty as that. I'm going to get through this story and really, really try to do some editing as I do it so that I'm not going down any rabbit holes or spots, as they may be.
You will not be afflicted by the curse of the black rabbit hole. So, yes, well, it is at its root a very simple family story. So I like your chances, sir. I'm also glad that it's not me this week. I think that I may have overcomplicated it by doing so much research on the history. But yeah, let's see what you got with the official pull to open summary of Demons of the Punjab in 1 minute, starting in 3, 2, 1, go.
So Yaz's grandma talks about how she was the first woman married in Pakistan. She gets intrigued by this. She asks the doctor to take her back to just see her grandma when she was there in Lahore. It takes her back. Turns out they're in the countryside, and it's right where India and Pakistan are about to be separated. And then she finds out that her grandmother was actually engaged to this guy named Prem, who's a Hindu. And they end up, there seems like there's a alien plot to kill someone there because they've killed this holy man. So the doctor tries to protect everyone from it, and they proceed with the wedding. But because the partition is happening right then and there, Prem's brother Manish is very much been influenced by sort of ethno-nationalists in India and disapproves of the wedding. Turns out he was the one who killed the holy man. The aliens are actually just there to bear witness because that's what they do. They're not assassins. They're there to accompany people and bear witness to when people die and are forgotten. So the doctor realizes they can't do anything. The wedding goes ahead and they have to leave. And the aliens sort of bear witness and end up just absorbing Prem into their sort of database or something.
Yes, when Manish shows up with the hordes, which is sort of the surprise. I'll start there. That it's sort of you're kind of expecting that Manish is going to be the one to shoot Prem. Well, it's not. It's these bandits that he's called in. Right.
Yeah. So that's the thing. So yeah, sorry, there was a lot. I probably shouldn't have even done the birthday thing at the beginning because it was like I really I think I did a pretty good job of cutting to what they were doing.
You did,
but all that it was still kind of an extraneous detail. I did want to say you really want to say more and more about them being there and sort of experiencing this stuff because that it's one of the better episodes in terms of setting. And having the characters really kind of become sort of a part of what they're observing. And obviously they have that very strong connection with Yaz and her grandmother. So
there is a denouement as well, which you didn't mention, where Yaz does actually go back to see her grandmother, who offers to tell the story behind the watch. Did you mention the watch? The watch of Prem?
No. Kind of a detail.
The ceremony.
That's a rabbit hole, man.
Yeah, it's the thing. I mean, it's sort of the MacGuffin of this, right? Because it is what the Doctor uses to plug into the telepathic circuits of the TARDIS to get back to 1947 on the border. The TARDIS basically locates by the watch. But she offers to tell Yaz the story. Now, at this point, we know that Yaz was present at that first wedding. Yaz knows the whole story. Do you think, first of all, that Hanan recognizes her or remembers her, or wants to tell the whole story of that, or there was someone who looked a lot like you that was there? What do you think is the intention of Hanan finally being ready? Or is it just open to interpretation?
Yeah, I don't want to get too timey-wimey with it. I don't think there's too much plot to read here. I do think she doesn't know. Because why would you? Why would you even suspect that your granddaughter's a time traveler and it really was her? I'm sure she thinks she looks like her, and it's probably one of the main reasons she's her favorite granddaughter, which, by the way, I thought was a great line. I mean, I think these fun ways they humanize Yaz's family. Chibnall takes some heat for not being as good at those domestic relationships as RTD, but I will say in this episode, and it's been I think the writer is Vinay Patel. I'm not sure. Vinay Patel, and he's quite good at it. He's quite good at the domestic stuff.
He's the first non-Chibnall writer in Series 11. So any plaudits for the good family stuff in this, are definitely his, not necessarily Chibnall's in this point.
Yeah, but getting to the grandma, I think she doesn't know it, but I think something in her life has made her share these things with her granddaughters, whatever that is, and we don't really know what it is. It's an off-screen thing, and so I think that's ultimately it. She's probably getting older. I mean, you see her in a wheelchair. It's time for her, I think, to kind of just start unlocking this part of her life, and this is just part of that.
Sharing the heritage, which is one of the lines that lands a bit clunkily and makes it feel a bit like an after school special, where Yaz says something like, if you don't share your stories, we'll never know. That's our heritage, or something like that.
Yeah, I actually didn't mind that, though. I'm usually the one to accuse something of after school special, but it is like, I thought that's so true. Like, especially when you notice your elders, your elderly relatives starting to sort of fail, and you start to really appreciate what you're probably going to lose when the time comes for them. And you really want what they've lived, what they've experienced to go on somehow and be part of your life. And I think that resonates with a lot of people. Obviously, this ends up being that ends up being the story, right, with the aliens and all that stuff.
That is the moral of the story. Is if you've had grief in the family recently, like I have, lost my dad last year, talked about them on podcasts before. One of the things you realize is how many stories you lose that you will now just never know. So if there's one lesson you take from this podcast, even beyond all the partition stuff we're about to talk about. Please do that. Go to your elderly relatives. Bring them cake. Get them silly on sugar. Get them talking about their history and their lives and all the stories that you maybe have tuned out before. Like, really, really pay attention, because they could surprise you with, as her nanny does here with this whole first woman in Pakistan to get married thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good moment. I really like that whole scene. I like, that's why I kind of didn't want to leave it out of the TLDW. It's just such a relatable moment. It's, you got the little bit between the two daughters. The watch is actually a good tease, like, because it's not obviously sort of sci-fi or supernatural. It's just kind of almost like this interesting thing. Is it a love story? Is it a spy story? Is it it's some kind of mystery that you just, okay. And the fact that she, like you said, she says at least claims to be the first woman married in Pakistan. Like, that's interesting. It's like, okay, let's open this sort of historical treasure chest and see where it leads us.
We'll get into the history corner shortly, but just to fact check her there, she's probably wrong.
I figured, but I get it, right? Like, she, in her world, she was the first person married.
Yes, because the weird thing, the history of partition, I've discovered, is full of just weirdness and stuff that doesn't add up, and anarchy all over the place. Pakistan actually came into existence on the 14th of August, 1947. Partition, the actual announcement of where the lines were, was on the 17th of August. So
took him 3 days to draw those borders.
Yes, which is, we're going to get into why that was and what a big mistake that was. But my goodness.
Before we get into the corner, let's take a step back on the episode and sort of its, I guess, the Doctor Who format is pseudo-historical.
Yes.
And so you go back into a moment in history, and they sort of layer on a little bit of sci-fi that is going to preferably enhance what you're seeing. And I think in parts it does that, in parts it doesn't. And but I will say this, it does it way better than Rosa, those sci-fi elements anyway. So we talked about Rosa almost like a little over a year ago. And I think both of us, when we talked about that episode, we were very critical of sort of I forget his name now, even the space racist from the future.
That's all you need, space racist dude from the future.
Yeah, it was just a very clumsy way to do it. It almost made you long for the episode just being a pure historical. In this case, again, I think the alien stuff is still one of the weak spots here, but I don't mind it. Like, I know what they were going for, and I think what they were going for mostly works, which we've already sort of talked about, where they're this alien race that used to be assassins. What are they called? They're the Jarians or something like that.
Yeah.
And they used to be assassins, but then their world was destroyed, and I forget the details of that. But what they've become this race of people who bear witness to the Jarian. That's it. Yeah, the Jarians, and their world was destroyed. They basically are there when people who die are essentially forgotten. And it's a nice idea.
Certainly more like Doctor Who has done it before, kind of, with testimony. We talked about testimony last week in the gift story, where the Doctor gets the gift of seeing Bill again thanks to testimony. I kind of like this one a little bit more because the aliens have an emotional reason to go around the universe doing this. And something about the fact that they do it, like it really taps into our sense that people die forgotten and their stories unknown. And like that's kind of the theme of this episode, right? Is the heritage, the stories that get lost.
Exactly.
Lives that get lost. And the idea of them being preserved, and I love the sort of the resolution of that kind of subplot where you see at the very end Prem's face floating up into the hologram full of places of all of these forgotten people. And I'm getting a shiver right now just thinking of it. Like that's one of the big emotional beats of this episode. I gotta say, not a lot of Doctor Who makes me cry. Demons of the Punjab, the first 2 times I saw it, absolutely wept. And that's one of the bits where you're like, our history is full of people whose deaths never get witnessed, whose lives never get recorded. What a lovely idea. And actually, I did watch this with the friend that I've been discussing for several podcasts, so I want to get into Doctor Who, is actually Indian. And I should say she's not into science fiction at all. But she really liked it.
Now she is.
Now she is. Yeah, Demons of the Punjab changed everything. No, it didn't. But she did like this as a concept.
Yeah.
Right? I think it's one of those things that tickles your brain, even if you're not a science fiction fan.
Well, first thing I'll say, I don't entirely dislike. I'm not a hard on the other side of a fence here, so don't get me wrong. But I do think testimony worked better. And this is why I think these assassins turned caretakers / witnesses doesn't work as well, because you don't really know what their end game is, or what, like they say they bear witness and we were there, and then you kind of see him put into a database. And that's why I was very kind of like, when I ended the TLDW, I was very like, well, what is that even? And at least with testimony, you kind of know what they're doing and what they can do with this notion of sort of preserving people's consciousness and lives. In this case, there's no real like, and then what, right? Like, then what do you do with it? And also I would say, like, why not just do testimony, right? There's these sort of assassins or whatever, this alien race we've never seen before, we'll never see again. It's fine. It's just like what they're doing is honestly so beautiful, as you said. And the notion of it is I want more of that. I want it to be more of a thing woven throughout the Doctor Who universe. I would love to see this idea brought back and given a little more depth. As it is, it's just kind of like obviously a metaphor for what we're seeing with Yaz's family and the not forgetting stuff. But I think there's more potential. I wish they'd really went for it and maybe done even something more big with this race during the Chibnall era. Even if it's just of that era, I think it would have been great.
I liked it more the more that I dove into the history of Partition, because Partition, one of the lessons I think we can draw from it is that there is a duality of nature within each human. Like, we can all be our best selves or our worst selves. Here are former assassins who basically turned into oral historians, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Reflecting the duality of we can be our best selves, we can riot, we can fear, we can attack the other, our worst selves, or we can be our best selves and like live in a very integrated society like India was before Partition, and kind of still is, even after the rupture. I think it's appropriate for this. Whereas, so testimony, like, it's kind of for the head. I think this is for the heart.
I hear that.
I just want to shout out for 2 other scenes that made me weep both times. One is Graham talking to Prem. And you've got to say, Bradley Walsh has a real, like, even though it's about Yaz, and Yaz is centered, Bradley Walsh gets a couple of really good scenes in this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of them is, like, he knows Prem is going to die, but Prem is getting ready for his wedding. I'm choking up just thinking about it. And he puts the garland of flowers on his uniform, and Graham is like, "You still look like a schoolboy in maneuvers," and he's saying it in a loving way. And he's got this whole thing where he's just like, he doesn't know what to say, and he's like, doing the old English, like, pat him on the shoulder kind of thing, and he's like, "Yeah, come on, marriage,
Well,
gotta go have a marriage for a day."
Yeah, it's one of these things that I think everything you said is 100%, but it's like the third act of this story I'm really kind of ambivalent about, because I love all the things you just described, and they have, there's so many good scenes, like when Yaz is crying at the wedding too, so that's a good one. I mean, they all sort of know what's going to happen to Prem, and that there's nothing they can do about it. That's, if they change things, then Yaz ceases to exist, and who knows what even happens with the timeline. So all they can do, like the aliens, of course, is just bear witness to it, and it's tearing them apart. It's beautiful. At the same time, it does mean that your main characters don't actually do anything to affect the story for what should be sort of the pivotal climactic part, right? So it's all emotion, and that's good to an extent, but it can't really be weaved in the story in a conventional way. I can see why people would love it. I felt a little like, I wish there was something they could do, right? And so that we could all kind of walk away with this with maybe something, not just like a happy ending, because I know that's impossible, but something that, I guess
I think what
a corollary.
Like you want an Aztecs-like moment. You want a Barbara. You want someone who says no.
Well, I was actually going to say Fires of Pompeii moment.
Yes.
Where it's like, we have to let history take its course, but can we save someone? Can we do something here?
Gotta say, Fires of Pompeii does kind of ruin it for all later historicals, because you're like, why isn't the Doctor taking one family? I think we've established that you do.
But I also get they can't do it, right? They can't save Prem, because then Yaz ceases to exist.
Yes.
So they failed already, basically, the climax happens an act early, in other words.
Yes. And I kind of like that. Again, this is Doctor Who trying something new. And the real reason I love that scene with Graham and Prem, because the sounds are getting louder, and the violence is getting closer. Prem actually says that. And Ryan says, "Who's doing this stuff?" And I just want to quote all of Prem's reply here, because I think it's a beautifully written summary of Partition, which we're going to get into. He says, "Ordinary people who have lived here all their lives, whipped into a frenzy to be part of a mob. Nothing worse than when normal people lose their minds. We've lived together for decades, Hindu, Muslim, and Sikh, and now we're being told our differences are more important than what unites us. Like we learned nothing in the war," which he gives extra sort of weight to that, being a veteran himself. "I don't know how we protect people when hatred's coming from all sides." And then Graham gets to do a line which would normally be the Doctor's line, right? He says, "Well, all we can strive is to be good men." And you can see him sort of like he's coming to that conclusion in his head at the same time. And you, Prem, are a good man. And he gives him a very own Graham-like hug. And then, wipes away a tear, says, "Come on, marriage." Yeah, all we can strive is to be good men. And if more people had strived to be good men in this moment, and it was this sort of societal tidal wave, hard to stand against. One man did, and we'll get to him. Well, the other scene, I just want to mention quickly, the other scene that made me weep every time, I wonder what you think of it, is the wedding itself. And it could have, I think this is a divisive one, but I'm going to say I love it. I actually love the Doctor's speech about where she says what her faith is, which is love, in all its forms, the most powerful weapon we have, because it's a form of hope. You believe in it, you fought for it, you wait for it, and now you're committing to it, which makes you right now the two strongest people on this planet, maybe in the universe. And I love that idea, especially, again, because you know that this marriage is not going to last. We know in advance, like, Prem's got a day, if that. But of course, all of us, like, we don't know if we're going to drop dead the day after our wedding. It's like, this really is a universal thing. So yes, she's right. That commitment that you make to each other It's huge. It's huge. That's why we celebrate weddings. And even though it's kind of cheesy and they've all got a flower in their hair and, they use the rope, the Hindu, that's a Hindu thing, isn't it? It says yes, tying the hands together with the rope. That really spoke to me, that scene. But
yeah, I got to say,
to you.
Well, I appreciated those scenes more this time because the way they wrote this, I think the first time I watched it, I was very caught up in the alien plot and the fact that the aliens which the doctor, and this is just before the wedding because she's already figured it out because she's teleported right then. But before that, she thinks they're assassins and that they're essentially under siege. And, they're obviously very technologically advanced because they have teleports and they've already killed a guy. And they're sort of barely able to repel them because of the sort of doohickeys the doctor sort of puts of folks. So I was always caught up in like, why are you even considering doing a wedding or doing anything? Like, why isn't it all hands on deck? We have to figure out this alien problem and put everything else on hold, right? That was just, it struck me as weird. Like, guys, aliens are right outside. This isn't the time to be painting henna on our hands. That's kind of what I wanted to shake everyone into doing.
Maybe why Umbrine's mom does such a bad job. Which I love.
Yeah.
Umbrine herself in the future kind of disses the henna again, not recognizing it.
But this time around, I could appreciate more of those emotional beats. So I kind of wish they'd written it differently because the fact that not only are there aliens and they're assassins, I mean, just the fact that they're aliens, right? And that, or demons or whatever, this supernatural thing is clearly happening. Like no one seems all that surprised or aghast by it, right? So that's a little weird. But the wedding, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, so like the wedding, I like the doctor's speech, but I want to talk about Manish and the actor, who I think like the choices this actor makes, it's Hamza Jatua. And I thought of everyone, I thought he had probably the best performance. I thought he was stellar because he has this cold intensity throughout, and there's nothing exaggerated. There's no like Davros like histrionics. There's no dumb ominous scares from the director. There's nothing really to read on this guy, which keeps it a bit of a mystery, even though you can kind of tell like something's up with this guy. And who else would it be? Like the grandma, like or whatever. Like there's got to be a bad guy here. But I like that he's just this cold person who clearly has a worldview that doesn't line up with everyone else.
And he's been listening to angry voices on the radio.
Oh, I got to talk about that line because as soon as that line was uttered, I was watching this with Grace and she looked at me and she says, "I get it. Podcasts." Yes. Which is a bit of a self-aware thing to notice. But exactly, like there's just so many on, all sides of the political aisle, just angry people screaming into microphones more than ever today.
Yes.
But they've always existed,
They've always existed. The young, particularly susceptible to them.
Yes.
And that is like, we'll get into History Corner in a second, but the character of Manish, the more I looked into history, the more believable Manish is, because partition was driven in no small part by the young, by young people who were unfamiliar with the whole tenet of nonviolence or did not believe. Gandhi had won independence for India basically through nonviolence. And then there were a lot of people who were like, well, at this point, nonviolence is hopeless because Hindus and Muslims are attacking each other. Sikhs are attacking Muslims as well. And it was the young who were like, screw your old ways, Dad. Forget about nonviolence. Like, we need a bit of violence to save us from the other,
Absolutely. So listen, I think, yeah, we've sort of transitioned into it, but let's do this.
The character of Manish reminds me. I'm holding up a book called Tamas right now, which means darkness in Hindi. This is one of the best novels to be written about the subject of partition. Go pick it up. It's it's wonderfully small scale, like Demons of the Punjab is, just set in a single town in the Punjab. And there is a character in this, and a famous scene in that, like this famously was a TV series in India that shocked a lot of people, because there is a young man who goes from learning how to kill a chicken to pointlessly stabbing a perfume vendor in a really, really hard to watch scene. Like this poor old dude who's done nothing to no one. And he just goes out and stabs him because he's in such a frenzy of like, oh, stab the next person who walks along, because he's been listening to those angry voices on the radio. And it's exactly that thing. The young are susceptible to it. I'm sure, you all know what we're talking, like whatever era you are listening to this in, you know what this means. And yes, Partition was full of it. It was full of lies and rumor and exaggeration and angry voices on the radio and the printing press, spreading a lot of hatred.
Well, we've done it. I think we've done a full transition into the history corner.
Yes.
Even though the jingle might feel a little out of place given the weight of all this. But yeah, give me this. So like, it definitely, I was more into, like, to be clear, readers, listeners, Chris is the scholar now on this. I know very little about it. And I, first of all, just want to give this script points for highlighting a part of history that is not talked about that much, that does matter to the West. There's flashbacks to World War II. But it isn't really thought of as a sort of, it doesn't really talked about really all that much in fiction or otherwise. So I really don't know a lot about it other than that it happened. I actually learned from this episode just how brutal the death toll was and how the scale of it, which doesn't surprise me. Obviously, these are very populous countries. But what I don't really know is how is it generally regarded today? I imagine it really depends on who you ask, on whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, or if it prevented a civil war or made things worse. I'm sure there's a lot of perspectives on this, but can you give me the quick summary of like, what do people think of the partition today?
That's a great question, because it's still a political football. And I got to say, so partition, like the actual history of partition on the subcontinent is not much talked about because it was so brutal.
Interesting.
And the more we find out about it, the more brutal it was. I mean, just to give you an image, train loads of refugees coming both ways from Pakistan to Pakistan were slaughtered. We're talking entire train loads of people where trains would just pull into stations and everyone would be dead, except the people who had smeared blood on their face to play dead. There's a lot of that. Wow, my goodness. I mean, there is... I can also recommend another good novel that a lot of people in the subcontinent now call Train to Pakistan, which is, like Demons of the Punjab, set in a single village, and you only see things through the villagers' perspectives. And it's kind of chilling at the end when one half of the villagers, the Sikhs, sort of go Lord of the Flies on the other half, the ones that they've just embraced as brothers, but they just happen to be on a train going through their village now, so they're the other. They're the Muslims heading for Pakistan. We've got to get revenge. So that everyone knows it in fictional form, but yeah, there is a huge division and is still very, very political, because obviously partition is the beginnings of Pakistan. So obviously in Pakistan, it is venerated. We're going to be talking about Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan, who is himself venerated. He died a year. He actually had cancer. This was unknown at the time when they were negotiating partition. Partition could have come out very differently if they just waited, but he happened to be the right person, right place, right time. So he's venerated. Partition is venerated in Pakistan. In India, it's more seen as more of a loss, but also it is political because India is going more sort of Hindu nationalist under the Modi government.
You're talking about at the time, or no, wait.
Well, no, now.
Now.
Now. So, So
I got you.
The one book that I could recommend as a history book is Yasmin Khan is a historian of this, and she wrote a book called The Great Partition in, I believe, 2008, and then she did an updated version.
Wait a minute, Yasmin Khan?
Yes.
the companion of the...
I
The
believe
character
that
in
is
this
the name.
episode?
Yeah, you know what? Let me just double
This is a
check
common name.
that. The Great Partition
It's all good. Well,
is yes, Yasmin Khan.
wow. All
Wow.
right.
I didn't
Common
realize.
name.
It only just struck me because I've been doing these things separately. Wow. Yeah, she's a young Oxford history professor, also born in Britain, like Yaz. But half of this book is just like pointing out how hard it is to do a neutral take on partition because it is a political football now.
So we see in the story, like, this is sort of the countryside, right? It's not Lahore, it's not a major city. It's obviously right on where the border is. In fact, Manish goes out and says the map leaked a few days ago or something, and that here's where it is, and he sort of proudly, hammers into something in the ground that's a marker, like here's India, here's Pakistan.
Yes.
And everyone's kind of disgusted about it. But I mean, I don't know. I guess that's not a weird notion, or that stuff like that must have actually happened.
It did. And the tragedy of partition is that at the beginning, people didn't think it was that big a deal. They had no concept. Nobody on any side had any concept that there would be 12 million refugees.
Right.
That millions of people would be going back and forth between the countries, and that neither country would be able to handle it. And the refugees would make things worse and worse, and there would be entire columns of people going back and forth because they didn't think that these borders were going to be a big deal. Nobody on any side. Like, there were newspaper stories, before partition happened, because it wasn't just like a sudden thing. It had been talked about for a few years. The notion of Pakistan as a country kind of, had developed within Jinnah's lifetime. Like, he was converted to the idea of it. But it had been talked about. But they were publishing articles saying, yeah, we probably won't even need passports. We won't need visas to cross this border. They were thinking of it as more like an EU kind of arrangement. Right? India and Pakistan they're going to be close friends, and maybe, and certainly on the Hindu side, there was a lot of thought of this of like, we'll let the Muslims go off, have their own country, and then they'll come crawling back because it's just going to collapse. Like,
they just figured it would fail.
Yeah, it'll just fail. It'll be fine. We'll just wait. And even as it was happening, as all this violence was happening, like, they were still having the independence celebrations. Like, we knew that the violence was happening. Gandhi's over on the other side of India. So there were two provinces that needed to be.
I was just going to ask you about that. So most people know Gandhi, and like, he didn't, like, when was this? 1947, right? And he died in 1948. So what did he have to? Yeah. So I guess, what did he have to do directly with the partition? Like, was he pro? Was he against? And what, how did that?
Against.
He was very against. I see.
Very against. Gandhi struggled his whole life for Indian independence and Indian unity. And the thing is that for centuries, India had been, when you think of India, I want you to think of like fine woven fabric of like, of Hindu and Muslim, just interwoven everywhere. With Sikhs, Sikhs are 2% of the population of India, 14% of the population of the Punjab. So it's kind of a shame they don't get more of a shout out than like one or two mentions in Demons of the Punjab. But whatever, like, it's a very important area for them. And division didn't necessarily make sense, right? Because here's an interesting fact that I can't get out of my head, is that the fact that Pakistan, India, instantly became the largest Muslim country in the world when it was created. The second largest Muslim country in the world at that point, India. Even after partition.
Interesting.
Right? So it's still interwoven. And that's part of why the problems that the partition caused is, waking Hindus and Muslims up to their differences, right? When they've been living side by side for so long. And Gandhi wanted to preserve that. And he would do things like walk into a town where there has been differences, where they've attacked each other, and literally just walk up to everyone's doors, knock on the door. A lot of doors were slammed in his face. And he would get the Muslim headman of that town and the Hindu headman of that town to literally live in the same house. And it was brilliant. That's what we needed to do. Now, unfortunately, Gandhi wasn't in the Punjab at independence. He was in Bengal, which was the other province that needed to be divided, and in Calcutta, which is sort of where the violence of partition started in 1946. It was kind of renowned as like, this is, if violence breaks out between Hindus and Muslims, it's going to be in Calcutta.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I think, as you describe stuff and it's like, well, it was all interwoven. I mean, again, I'm ignorant of the history, but there must have been a rationale to the partition in that it's going to prevent or even not prevent some tragedy, put the paths of these two distinct sort of, I guess, ethno-religious groups on the paths, that I guess whoever the British Empire deems they should be on. So
let's talk about that, because the British are not. I don't want to give the impression the British are uninvolved in all of this, even though they kind of did take a hands-off approach to it. Which was the cause of a lot of the violence, was that they weren't stepping in. But also they've been told to...
Well, not necessarily the cause, but I know what you mean. They could have done something more about it. Like, I think the cause... I mean, why do people hate each other and hate the other, et cetera? I think ultimately that's kind of what it comes down to. And why on a certain level, like, just to bring it back to the show, like, why Manish's actions at the end probably seem a little incomprehensible to most viewers, right? Like, he's basically leading his brother to die and lures these people here who are sort of these ethno-nationalists or whatever. And Prem even knows one of them. Like he says, we fought together. I know you. And the guy kind of kills him without a thought. Manish seems to be okay with that, or has made his peace that his brother needs to die for this new ideology to take shape. And like I say, I think a lot of people look at that and go like, wait a minute, like, that's pretty extreme, and it is. But that's kind of the point.
It's so accurate, and it's heartbreaking. I mean, if you're a student of the American Civil War, and which pitted brother against brother in a lot of cases, that is nothing compared to partition. Yeah.
Well, lines in the sand, lines in rivers. It's like, it's just so silly, and you just sort of almost get the sense that Manish is just kind of making it up, which he kind of is, even though. Whatever the map says, it's kind of like it only means something if you let it. And he definitely wanted to let it. Yeah, oh, man. Well, okay, listen, the corner has been... so
long. I got to say, it's got to be... I'll add a few more thoughts there. Yeah. It was like 5 years before they actually fortified the borders. So, like, it was very porous at first, and that's why...
Well, you needed guys like Manish and his goons to enforce it.
Yeah.
Like, that's basically... people stepped up. It was like people directing traffic at... when there's a power outage. In this case, it's when there's a partition, we're just going to take up some rifles and just make sure people are on one side and others are on the other. Yeah,
exactly what happened. And I think that my only fault with that scene is that they arrive on horses, which sort of still, along with the countryside and the holy man, the sadhu, makes you think that we're in sort of, ancient rural India. Well, no, India was like a kind of a modern, thriving, not industrial state, but certainly like they had tanks, they had rifles, they had so the idea of if those goons had arrived in like motorized vehicles, like suddenly the first ones that we see in the whole story, I think that would be so wonderfully and appropriately jarring to be like, whoa,
that's fair, because they come up on horseback and it plays into this countryside notion. Maybe I think that would have been good, because not only would it have been jarring, it would have made you think more about the world outside of this countryside village that we've been with, right? And what this is in. Yeah, that would have been a good call. So I think we also have to answer a few questions as we emerge from the History Corner. And those questions are, of course, the 4 questions to Doomsday. First question, why did the randomizer take us here? Okay, so think about where we were just at. We were at A Christmas Carol, and that was all about changing sort of one person's personal history to make things a little better. And here is kind of the opposite idea of leaving that history alone because, well, I mean, you can't. You want to preserve who the person is in the modern time or the current time. Also, but I think that you can go beyond that and say like we need to preserve this because it's just important to witness it. It's not our place to change it, but we need to look straight at it. And I think that's kind of the contrast here.
Yes. So we talked about the fact that I asked for something less sort of morally weighty, less naughty, less cerebral.
A light read.
I'm not going to dare ask that of the randomizer ever again.
Mm.
But yeah, I think like Curse of Karen was about interference. It was sort of a partition thing. Like, 4,000 people are going to die on that ship, so I have to meddle in Kazran's life. Now, that's kind of what was happening with India, that these elites, these public school boys that, Mountbatten and Nehru and Chibnall were kind of just deciding that, we're gonna mess with the whole fabric of the entire country because we're going to save lives. But, is it? Yeah. Will it? Like, it's a trolley problem. And, we saw that the Doctor almost messed that one up in A Christmas Carol, where he almost, Kazran almost hits his younger self. But so I think there's the other reason that I personally needed to learn about partition, a lot of personal reasons, and boy did I. I've also got a bi-generation connection. Like, it's a tenuous.
Oh wow, go.
Like, because we're all bi-generations on our minds, like that's kind of the nice version of partition, right? Quite literally creating 2 out of 1. And but this is kind of a historical example of where bi-generation went terribly, terribly wrong.
Yeah, I could say that for sure. All right, folks, moving on to the second question, which is, what if the evil plot had succeeded?
Well, it did.
Yeah, I think that's pretty obvious. So it's like Manish's, the whole point of it is that the evil plot has to succeed, and Manish's actions lead to Prem's getting killed. And you could sort of expand that to the large scale, and that the evil plot being the partition itself. Yeah. Again, I'm not judging and putting up some alternate history where everything was all, rainbows and roses. But, certainly a lot of evils happened because of it. I think you kind of almost like, if we have to reverse the question in this case, right? It's like, what if the evil plot didn't succeed? And does that then become the Doctor rescuing Prem and helping him get away? And Yaz pops out of existence. And does the Doctor find some other end run to sort of make sure she stays a real person? That could be possible.
Yeah, then the Doctor spends the rest of her regeneration just like meddling around in Indian history, like trying to recreate the conditions to bring Yaz back. She keeps going further and further back. She goes back to the Mughals, and it just gets worse and worse. Well, that would be a season arc. I'd watch the hell out of that. I think if you look, I mean, I
don't know if I'd watch the hell out of that. But go on.
You raise an interesting point that the evil plot. It isn't necessarily Manish's. The evil part is Manish calling in the Goon Squad, right? Now, you could say that the Goon Squad that basically governed, yes. But it's the Goon Squad itself that's the evil plot. The Goon Squad's being everywhere. To quote Yeats, in the Second Coming, the worst are full of passionate intensity. That was really...
I kind of knew you didn't mean Captain Yeats there, but anyway, go on.
No. It's really the story of partition, was that the worst were full of passionate intensity. And it was all the criminals and the people who were, who wanted to slaughter, and the extremists who were kind of in charge in the absence of the British, in the absence of the new countries having any sort of force. In the absence, there was supposed to be a Punjab border force, like that thing disintegrated basically straight away. It worked in Bengal because Gandhi was, as Mountbatten said, my one-man border force. So
interesting.
You could definitely see a version of partition where the violence just keeps going. Right? That would be the evil plot succeed. Now, it did on a lower scale, but like, what if there were millions more to kill. There were more refugees. Like if India and Pakistan hadn't got a hold on the refugee crisis by the 50s, which they still kind of didn't, but like it could have been a lot worse.
Okay.
People hadn't known how bad it was. This could have gone on and on and on. Instead of which, we've just got two, nuclear-armed countries kind of way outspending what they need to on military budget every year, just pointing weapons at each other. I guess that's avoiding the full evil plot, is that they're not actually in a shooting war at the moment.
Well, thank the world for small favors. Okay, I think we've exhausted that one. Why don't we move on to the third question, which is, where is the Clara Splinter?
Well, you've got to say that because, especially after I've read about all of this violence, and not to get too graphic, but I will say that one of the only ways that it was assumed that you could tell if someone was a Muslim in India was that they were circumcised.
Okay.
So you can kind of just imagine the kind of result from that there was a lot of defiling and removal
Dude,
of certain body parts.
You got to stop the history corner at some point. It's the grimness. I don't know if we can take it.
What I'm saying here is the real history of partition is much more violent than what they did. What we saw in the document.
We're looking for Clara, Chris.
So, Clara is keeping the roving bands at bay. And the other villagers, because I assume that they're not just living in a house by themselves,
right?
Prem in one house and Umbreen in the other, Prem and Manish on one side. Like, two houses is all we actually see, and it is part of the genius of the script. You don't much think beyond that, but there's got to be other people other than the sadhu, and
it's all budgets and TV, and they shot this episode in Spain, and I think they had what they had, and maybe there just wasn't enough time or enough to work with there to sort of create a credible village set, essentially, because basically you see the barn, you see the inside of the house, you see the countryside, and really not much else. So it's very, very rural. It is, but given that this is right on the border. I think we are to assume that Manish is correct, because a lot of stuff got leaked. India was kind of a leaky sieve for journalists at this point, and so it's not out of the bounds of reason that he would have got the border ahead of the official announcement, because it was there in the Viceroy's house in sealed envelopes. There would have been people who saw that. So there should have been roving bands all over the place. Like this, these guys should have been visited before. This wedding should have been stopped. This wedding would have been notorious. So Clara is distracting them, keeping them at bay. She's a dancing girl. She's getting the roving bands drunk. Stopping them from going up that road. Trying to do her bit. I can see that. I actually placed her in the present day, and the daffodil that Umbreen gives her granddaughter, I figured that was maybe something from Clara somehow, because it couldn't just be something preserved from before, I thought, because it would have withered, right? So I figured, maybe she's doing that thing to make sure, they steer clear of autons, because daffodil. Auton, right?
So
it's a real daffodil, not a plastic one.
I gotta say, like, there's too much to mention about Deanians of the Punjab, but you just reminded me of it. Vinay Patel had a weird case of life imitating art, where he went to see his grandmother before she went to India, and this is after the episode had screened. She hadn't seen it, and she gave him his dead grandfather's broken old watch.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah, he's got a picture of it on Twitter.
Boom.
He did an amazing thread on this, by the way. Go check it out on the history of partition.
Cool. We'll link it to the show notes. But before we do that, we need to answer the final question, the ultimate question, the only question that matters for Demons of the Punjab. What did we think of this story? The Pull to Open rating system has 6 ratings. There's the Dalek, which we give to a good episode of Doctor Who. The Ogron we give to a bad episode of Doctor Who. The Professor Hater we give to a not-so-great episode, but at least we learned something. The Viscount Banger, which we reserve for the best of the best. The Fixed Point in Time, which is a show beyond rating. And The Lady Cassandra, which is a show with a paper-thin plot, but at least it looks good. All right, well, I'll give you the last word on this. I'm just going to say this was a very nice Dalek for me. It was definitely shinier than the last time. I think there are some weak spots in the story that would have easily been fixed had they talked to a Doctor Who fan.
Yeah.
But there's so much good stuff in this story. Like, there's great characters, there's great performances. I'm kind of mad that they didn't fill in some of the plot stuff with the aliens and the villagers' reaction to them with something more believable, so you're not caught up in that. And again, points for taking on history that is very weighty and relatively unexplored. But, particularly that third act, I'm really torn on it because the characters are just kind of watching what's happening. And yes, they're taking part in it, but they can't do anything. It makes the whole thing a little bit hollow in some ways. So I can't give it the highest rating. There's also a couple of really annoying things. Actually, really just one, which is the whole Sheffield thing. I wish they'd left out. I wish you didn't need it. You didn't need her to actually point to the town and say, like, that's where I'm going to go and make it some kind of dartboard thing. That was just kind of silly to me. Like, she just ended up at Sheffield. You don't have to mention it. We know where she's going. We know where Yaz is. People just end up in places. You don't have to explain it. That really annoyed me for some reason. And the other thing is so minor, I'm not even going to mention it. So Dalek.
It is just the Sheffield point. Like, it is a good point. Like, having now seen this episode from an Indian perspective, my friend, like, it is a good point that, like, English names do sound weirdly exotic. When you're that far away from them, the fact that Sheffield sounds exotic to Umbrian, I think is it's kind of nice. Yeah, you sort of need to jump through a few hoops to get, like, did she really just stick her finger in the map?
What if she'd hit Yakutsk?
Exactly. I had a similar thing of, like, being a child and wondering where in the globe I wanted to live, and I remember stopping my finger on Vancouver, British Columbia. So that's apparently where I'm destined to move to in the long run.
Nice town. You could do a lot worse.
I will say, so before I talk about my rating, I will say that I think that my Indian non-Doctor Who watching friend would agree with you that it is Dalek. She did like it as a story. Interesting, the thing that she noticed was, like, she was like, you can tell that they're British actors. And it's not necessarily like the way that they're talking. And by the way, I love how the
accents might have gave it away. Anyway, go.
I like how the TARDIS translation thing works in this, like where Prem says, "Oh, your Punjabi's good." That's a bit weird. She did think it was a bit weird that they would just show up in the countryside, random Brits. But there is that nice line about, "I'd keep that to yourselves, that you're British."
Right.
Keep it to yourselves right now. And everyone just sort of accepts it. That seems a bit weird. But the gestures, the mannerisms is what she was talking about. Like, these are clearly English actors doing English mannerisms, not Indian. And then we went to watch the TV version of Tomas, and I could see what she was talking about. Like, there's the Indian head waggle is often like there's a more formality of, like, how you stand and how. So that was a wonderful insight.
Interesting.
Like alien cultures, that we are all alien cultures to each other. And we don't fully understand, like, even when we're trying to do something nice and respectful and thoughtful like this. But what is it for me? Well, I gotta say, this is for me. This is my favorite Jodie, and I've already given Rosa a Viscount banger. So I kind of have to do the same for this, because this affected me more. This like, it made me cry twice. It did that Lord Reith, Sidney Newman thing that we talked about on the podcast ad nauseum, Doctor Who being educational. It did it for me as an adult. Like, it gave me enough of a toehold in what Partition is that I could then use that to go explore on my own. And wow, I mean, it was intense, but I'm glad I did. So full marks to Doctor Who for doing that. But I don't want to call it a Viscount banger. I still think it's a banger, not a banger. But I still think it's a banger. But The trouble is that Mountbatten was a Viscount. And I'm kind of a little mad at Mountbatten. So I think that I'm going to dub this once only with the moniker that was given to Gandhi, because he was known as a great soul, and great soul in Hindi, Mahatma. I think this story has great soul. It's a Mahatma banger.
Okay. Nice. I like that. It's be the stand in solitary status as that as the Mahatma, but we'll it'll
on the same level as the Viscount.
Exactly. We'll put that in the Hot 100 as the
Gandhi and Mountbatten became very good friends, actually. So kind of appropriate. They're on the same level for this.
Good stuff. All right, Spotify listeners, you know what to do now. Go into your app, rate the story how you would rate it. Is it a Dalek? Is it a Viscount banger? I'm sorry we don't have the Mahatma in there, but maybe we will actually. Maybe we'll chill. I'm gonna just this one time only. We'll alter the poll.
Just this once, Rose.
All right. Future me, mental note of that. And now, present me will go into our own device to find out where we're going next. And that is, of course, the randomizer.
That's right.
Randomizer consists of two parts. Only two.
Only two.
One is the Codex, which I have in front of me now. All the Doctor Who stories in existence, including all the way up to the Giggle right now in our present time. And we are going to pick one of those with the other part of the randomizer, which of course is the Executor, random.org.
Random.org, where we use bespoke randomness. Yes, I'm so glad to get on our TARDIS and flee like a refugee from Partition and get somewhere else. Now, first thing to do is Peter's going to give me the number from the Codex of how many Doctor Who stories, because we're now adding the church on Ruby Road.
Should we do that? Okay, we can do that. We can add the church.
When this podcast goes up, that will have aired. So, we can do that. So
we'd have to do two in a row then. A hot take and a less hot take, I guess. But okay. Well, that what that means, of course, is that the number of stories that we have left to do is still at 199.
Wow. Yes. Our random.org segment of our TARDIS console is stuck. We tried banging it on a hammer, but it stays at 199 every week. Thank you, specials. So before I hit the generate button, and random.org, by the way, the reason we use that is it uses atmospheric noise and Fajarans in the atmosphere rather than the guess at randomness, which is what an algorithm does. Before we do that, we issue some challenges, and I'm so hesitant to say take us to somewhere easier where I don't have to read as much, but I'm going to say screw it. Like let me use some reverse psychology here. No, give me the weightiest Doctor Who episode you can. Give me something that is going to have me like on the floor or against the wall, like smoking cigarettes and having red lines go between things on the wall. Give me a full on thing that's going to occupy every single brain cell.
Nice.
Bring it on.
All right. Well, I recently did a bit of an inventory, not an official inventory, but like just a look at the Codex and sort of how many we've done of each Doctor. And I'm feeling like the randomizer has been neglecting McCoy. Now, certainly McGann is your triple Yahtzee. He's got one adventure, but we've only done one McCoy in our entire run, Battlefield. And there's, that was obviously a time the show was being cut back. There aren't a ton of McCoy adventures, but there's more than Battlefield. So let's stop giving McCoy the short shrift here. Let's get some McCoy.
Yeah, there are so many of his that I haven't seen. So give us the best. Give us the ones that most feel the most real, like this, like Demons of the Punjab. Give us the real McCoy. I like that.
I like that too. All right.
So
shall we do the
real McCoy with lots of intense reading to do. I'm not sure what that would be.
He's got some stuff. Oh, I know what that would be. Let's see if we get it. Are you ready for a countdown?
I'm ready for the countdown.
All right. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Are you sitting comfortably?
10.
10. Hartnell. It's got to be Hartnell.
Got to be Hartnell.
The chase.
Oh my
Get
goodness.
ready. Get ready to pursue some commentary on a William Hartnell Dalek episode in The Chase. We're going back to London, 1965, among other places.
And my goodness, I did ask. I feel like I brought this on because I asked if we had a Beatles bingo. I remember doing the Three Doctors. So we had the "I'm a Walrus" lyrics in the Three Doctors, and we talked about how the Beatles are also in The Chase. So this
you were asking for it. You must have known there was still The Chase to do. Why were you even asking about the bingo card?
God.
You're tempting the randomizer. Well, it's caught up to that comment. We're doing The Chase. The Chase will be our first Doctor Who story to talk about in the year 2024. Folks, I am really looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to a new year and a new, renewed Doctor Who with none other than Ncuti Gatwa. So that's going to be amazing. Folks, this has been...
to stepping back into your time stream shortly and recording our episode on the Church on Ruby Road, which you probably just listened to. So, yeah, about to get timey-wimey with it.
Folks, this has been Pull to Open. It is, of course, a podcast, and podcasts are great things to subscribe to. So go ahead and do that now. Listen to us on all of the podcast apps. No, not you personally, but you can, and you have your pick of them. You can also find us on YouTube at youtube.com/pull-to-open. We're very active on TikTok, Pull to Open 63 on X /Twitter. And you can find us on pretty much anything, either Pull to Open 63 or Pull to Open. Just look for it. And drop us a line.
Do listen to podcasts on all of the platforms that you can, just to make sure that it's the same. Maybe we've inserted an Easter egg of a slightly different version of the podcast on a format that you don't normally listen to. So go check that out.
Could happen.
Yes. And then while you're doing that, we will go on a chase, and we will see you on the internet 2024.
See you back here, folks.